Frankly, I don't even know if I'm making this so I can show it to others, or if I just need to think about these emotions. This is a scary thing for me to make, even scarier to think about sharing it with others. I'm not often vulnerable with people, so making something as out in the open as this seems intimidating. I keep trying to convince myself, don't make it, people will just mock you, it's a stupid interest anyway, nobody will take it seriously. Now, I feel that I must do this for myself. It's interesting to me how people's past can vastly change the way they interpret and experience an art piece. This is true throughout any kind of art. I would say it's something that most people have been through, reading, watching, or playing something that plays with your brain perfectly to evoke those feelings of the past. Recently, this happened with me when I read the Sonic the Hedgehog IDW series. I've always been a fan of Sonic the Hedgehog. For as long as I can remember, I loved anything Sonic. Games, comics, TV shows, or anything else with the blue blur. This led me to get a very diverse image of what Sonic was. To this day, Sonic is a franchise I hold close to my heart. I grew up with these characters in mind. I have so much investment in this series. While now I do have opinions on what's good or bad with Sonic, and I don't like it all, it's still one of the most personal things to me. I should probably start giving some background information about myself for context. I've struggled with suicide most of my life. I don't really remember a time when I wasn't trying to kill myself. I don't know why this is. That's something I'm still trying to work on in therapy. It's possible it was the stress of having separated parents, or that I've always had a chronic fear of losing my mom in different ways, like her dying or losing custody of me. This came to a head when in late 2018 I chose to get hospitalized a second time. I knew if I went to my dad's house I was going to try and kill myself, as I had attempted the previous night. I started off desperately trying my best to work on myself. I really wanted to better myself as a person. I don't know what changed in me to make me feel this way, but it felt as if this was going to be it. That was my last attempt. It has been to this day. I told myself, you have to do this. You have friends that care about you. Better yourself for them. I didn't know that I would never see those friends again. While I was in that cold and isolating hospital, I learned two very important things. The first thing was, I was going to a wilderness therapy program called Evoke for 6 weeks. The second and more important thing was, I wasn't going to be able to see my mom again. The person at the hospital who said that didn't know how long that would last. I was in shock, unsure of how to respond to that. I said nothing for days. I just cried. I eventually went to that wilderness therapy program. I was still mentally recoiling from losing my mom. It felt like my lifelong fears had been realized. It felt like she was dead. I was scared of what she was going to do to herself. I remember while I was there, I encountered others who were struggling with their own issues. They seeked comfort in me. It was so hard to support others when inside I felt so deeply broken, so empty. I would keep telling myself, why'd you keep trying to support them when you can't even support yourself? You're not really helping them. In the end, I would stay in the wilderness therapy program for almost double the 6 weeks I had thought originally. All of which I had no sight of my mom for, and very little explanation as to why I couldn't see her. At the end, I found out I wasn't going to go back home after the program. I went instead to a residential treatment center called Elevations. Around November, I would start to see my mom again. It almost felt wrong, like seeing her shouldn't happen. I would stay at that treatment center until late 2018, where I went to a halfway house called The Approach. Then, in early 2019, over a year after I got hospitalized, I would be able to go home. I was finally free. These topics came back up again in my reading of the IDW Sonic the Hedgehog comic series. I have a goal to consume all major pieces of Sonic media before July. It was because of this goal that I'd realized I'd never read the IDW comic series. Like a totally sane human being, I read it all in one night. Originally, I wasn't too happy with it. It felt kinda slow. It began to pick up speed though once it got into its first major arc. It involved bringing Neo Metal Sonic in as a major villain. Neo Metal Sonic is a villain from Sonic Heroes, a game I have a ton of nostalgia for. This familiar arc sold me on the comics. I knew they were going to introduce my favorite character from the Sonic franchise, Cream the Rabbit, soon. I was so excited to see how this series would go. The next arc leading into it looked pretty interesting as well. It involved something called the Metal Virus. The Metal Virus turned everybody who got infected into zombots, metal versions of themselves with seemingly no control over their bodies who can affect others by touching them. After a fight, Sonic got infected. He was able to keep it off due to his speed. It was at this point that I got really interested in this series. By the time Cream was introduced, the Metal Virus arc was in full swing. Sonic was desperately trying to save Cream and her mother Vanilla. Meanwhile, Cream's robotic defender, General, attacks Sonic because he's infected, seeing him as a threat to Cream's safety. Luckily, Cream managed to convince General not to kill Sonic or the rest of the Metal Virus victims. This really felt like the most on-point version of Cream I've seen in a while. Unfortunately, during these events, Cheese, Cream's faithful companion, who she's almost never been depicted without, gets inflicted with the Metal Virus in front of her. Cream bursts into tears when she has to leave Cheese. I was getting interested at this point because Cream had never been majorly hurt this way in the games. They did get close to it in Sonic's Archie comic series, but never as bad as it would soon get in this series. Cream successfully saves herself and Vanilla. After those events, Cream goes to a shelter with her mother Vanilla. Well, there she's still trying to be happy and still trying her best despite all that's happened. When she's asked why she's still cheery, she responds with, "I'm gonna be as brave as Cheese was. I'm gonna put on the biggest smile I can and share it with everyone." This felt so on point for Cream. Being so brave despite being 6 years old, it felt like this was her best characterization I've ever seen. Almost immediately following this, things got worse. General was trying to refuse a caged Zombot entry into the shelter. Cream tried to convince General to allow the Zombot in. A group of refugees from the Zombot crisis come in with Vanilla. It's at this moment that they realize there's not enough room for everyone as the shelter's packed. Someone who's not fully infected snuck in. Someone asks if they're okay and they say, "I just didn't want to be alone." The infection completely takes over the person who snuck in, causing chaos to break out. The caged Metal Virus victim is set free. In the process of the turmoil, Vanilla gets infected as Cream is forcibly pulled away from her. This is when my brain made some connections. After this, Cream is extremely depressed. She seems to be desolate and alone. She gives very little response to people. This is the same Cream that I knew had been through so much and always had been polite and cheery. Even when she was going to save her mother, defeat Neo Metal Sonic, or was trapped in a white void dimension. The same Cream I grew up with. This broke her. Losing her mother was what it took to break her. It was easy for my brain to draw subconscious ties to my time in treatment. After that incident, a character named Whisper loses someone close to her. There's a single panel that I'd like to talk about. In that panel, it shows Whisper crying on Cream's lap. This affected me more than I would like to admit. I related to that more than I felt like I've related to anything since I've gotten out of treatment. It felt as if that one panel captured what treatment was like for me more than anything else, fiction or non-fiction, could. Even if I didn't realize what I was thinking at the time. Unfortunately, that is all of note that has been published regarding Cream as I'm writing this. Looking at future covers, it doesn't look like things will get better soon either. It looks like things are just going to get worse for her. I remember what I did after I read this. I couldn't hold back the tears. I was saying out loud things like, Vanilla didn't need to go. This just isn't fair. General was only trying to defend
She didn't
her.
deserve
He loves
this.
her. They don't phrase it like that, but that's what it is. He may have done the wrong thing, but he loves her. This just shouldn't have happened to her. This shouldn't have happened to her. She deserves so much better. I was just alone in my room, crying. It felt as if, even if I didn't realize it, this brought me back to the feelings I had in treatment. I didn't know why this affected me so much. I cried myself to sleep that night. The next day I went to therapy. During that time, we began talking about my mom. Something within me, perhaps it was just lingering emotion from reading the comic, figured it out. Everything made so much sense to me at that moment. It felt like the emotions, which I never processed, came out in this comic book. Like all those things I said weren't about Sonic anymore. They were about me. I think it would be a very easy joke for me to laugh and say, haha, I cried at a 6-year-old anthropomorphic rabbit. Isn't that funny? But I think it goes a lot deeper than that as to why this affected me so much. Why this story that's so very fantastical felt so very real and personal to me. I know Sonic isn't often a franchise people see as emotional, and this may attract judgment. But I do believe this is something I need to share, and I do think it's worth sharing, the way media we consume affects us.